Deva,
How are you, sir?
I'm great. How are you?
I cannot complain. It looks like I'll be missing you. I guess the Showpad guys are coming to your neck of the woods, huh?
Well, they have an office in Chicago now.
I know, but the Transform is also going to be in your neck of the woods, right?
Yes, downtown.
Absolutely. So, do you mind? Because my other two colleagues have a teaching day, so I'm just going to record our conversation. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Perfect. So, is there a reason why I cannot see you? You don't want to show your face to us?
I don't know that I guess maybe I didn't start my video.
It's sure,
There we go.
but because
There we go.
if you believe what Gong.io or Chorus.ai have to say, the more we can have face to face, it's probably better, even in this format. So that's what
There
they
you
say.
go.
How are you, sir? Hey, just
Excellent.
close the door here.
So are you presenting at Transform?
Not this time, no.
Okay.
But again, who knows, with the kind of research that we're trying to do, that next year I might get a chance to do it there as well. So one of the things that I'm actually doing at Ball State right now is that I'm actually having a kind of a web interview series where I talk to a lot of people on different topics. Essentially, I have two interviews on sales enablement, one with Tamara Schenk,
Yep.
one with Eli Cohen from Saleshood.
Just met him
Yeah,
last
Eli
week.
Cohen, essentially. And then he has a very good book that you might want to read. It's called Enablement
Mastery.
Mastery.
Yes, I got the book.
And normally, I don't like reading books. I only like reading books like Game of Thrones and stuff like that. But this Saleshood, I really think is one of the best books I've written. He claims that it's for enablement. He has another book called Saleshood. That's the name of his company.
Right.
But usually, I like sales enablement, the Enablement Mastery, the book much better, also from a sales management perspective. Because why I like it is he talks about all the things that a sales manager should be keeping in mind. And if you, as director of sales enablement, the biggest thing you can actually do is that get a bunch of that books and give it to your sales managers,
Yeah.
because I think that would be, you know what I mean? That would be
Yep.
a wonderful way of them to try to understand how this is. Yes, Cracking the Sales Management Code is a good book, but the Enablement Mastery, in my opinion, is a much better book. I loved reading it.
Yeah.
You guys have still made, I guess you're working with Showpad, that's fine, but it's the concept, it's the ideas that he has in that book, which I think are wonderful. Maybe you already read it, I did not know, so.
No, I have the book. I did read it. It was some time ago. I kind of defaulted to Tamara's book.
Indeed. So his book is called Enablement Mastery.
Right, and I do have that book.
I have
yes.
that book. I thought, okay, so
Yeah.
yeah, so I loved it. So for me, as I said, that I like reading Game of Thrones, and there's a guy called Steve Erickson from Canada. If you think the guy who wrote Game of Thrones rambles on, the other guy rambles on even more. He talks about philosophical stuff, but it's fantastic. So that's something that I absolutely love. But anyway, so no, but how are things? How are things at Fujifilm?
Troubling at times. I mean, full and transparency or whatever. So,
Yeah.
the print industry is undergoing such radical change, and our sales force is transforming,
Yeah.
or at least we're trying to transform them. So those are the challenges that I'm deeply immersed in. So I wouldn't want to paint a picture saying everything's great, everything.
Indeed.
So
No, but this is fantastic. So what we'll do is that in the time that we have is I'll take it through two parts. One is the part which I want to record, not for me, but more for my colleagues as well.
Yep.
So I'll tell you the idea behind what we're trying to do. And then it'd be really cool to see at some point in time if together how maybe we can interview not just you, but other people within your organization to get an idea of what sales enablement is. Right? And that is something that I would really like to discuss here. And then, of course, we can also, the second part of it, which I'll not record, but I'll talk to you a lot more about saying, okay, is there any way by which you think I can be of any help? You know what I mean? So we can talk about that as well. That second part is not as important as the first part, but so I'm going to ask you some basic questions, which I think I have an answer, but does not mean that I have an answer. But if today, this is more because we are starting a research project with two other academics. Now, if you go in and you go into Sales Enablement Society, or you go to these conferences like Showpad and Transform, you're talking to a bunch of people who have been immersed in sales enablement and the concept, and you know what I mean, in terms of how all of that comes into play, what constitutes sales enablement, how do we make it work, how do we measure the success of it, and everything else. But for a lot of academics, this is something that we are not always in connection in what's happening in reality and everything else out there. So what we want to do is that we want to try and document this in a kind of an academic writing style, which is again making something simple into something more convoluted, but that's how we need to get accepted by people in our industry. So if you could briefly tell us, what is sales enablement in your opinion, and also expound a little bit more on how sales enablement is kind of deployed in an organization like Fujifilm. Again, this is mostly for us to educate ourselves, and this is not going to be part of anything that is written up or anything, just to educate ourselves.
Yeah, okay. And I think everybody's situation is perhaps unique.
Yeah.
You know, you've got startup companies and a lot of the SaaS companies, and so you got SDRs, BDRs, account reps. I mean, you got all these different organizations. We're a direct sales organization. We sell printing equipment and consumables and supplies to printers who print books, catalogs, magazines, brochures, leaflets, posters, banners. I mean, just anything and everything, So we define it as the commercial printing, which is 8.5 by 11 kind of format. Sign and display, which is posters and point of purchase. And then packaging, which can be anything from a label to a flexible package to a folding carton or a corrugated. So we have this direct sales organization. Our industry and market is transforming. So, I basically defined sales enablement, and I basically carved this position out for myself. I was in marketing. And we had trained our team on professional selling skills, which is a Miller-Hyman course. And one of the guys who was certified to teach that course was retiring. I had taken it previously. I raised my hand and said, I'll get certified. I'll take that on. And then I realized, that our guys really didn't have the right skill sets to be able to do what we were asking them to do in this transformative market and industry, as well as our product portfolio changing and them having to adopt, and look at new skills. So I defined it as developing the sales enablement function as providing the content, the tools, the training, and the coaching to help improve their sales performance.
Fantastic.
But that's what we were so we were saying, okay, the old methods of printing, offset printing, screen printing, and flexographic printing was giving way to digital printing. And that was changing the nature of our product portfolio. We now are in the business of selling equipment more than consumable supplies. Before, when we sold film, it was Kodak and Agfa. Now we're selling printing equipment. It's Canon and HP and Konica and Xerox, who's a partner. So the competitive landscape changed. The nature of the sale changed. We weren't really equipping our sales guys beyond, let's say, the basic foundations of PSS. And so I stepped into the breach and basically have been working on this for some time. But the more I've gotten into it and done my own research, book reading, blogs, podcasts, everything else, I was realizing all the pieces that we were sort of missing in this more modern sales environment. 70% of the buyer decision being made before he ever calls the salesman is radically different than our guys who thought, okay, when I go in, I have to tell them about the product and the specifications, the speeds, the feeds, the this, the that, the other thing. And so that's really changed the nature of selling. So we've done just a lot of stuff that I didn't envision us doing under the banner of content, tools, training, and coaching.
Yeah, indeed. But Terry, let me ask you a couple of things. So, because when you talk about this, so you said when you raised your hand and said that, but did you have prior sales training? So you said you had to get certified. So essentially, were you in sales yourself before you went into marketing?
Very briefly, early in my career.
Good. So when you were in marketing, when you raised your hand and said, we want to understand what this Miller-Hyman methodology is so that I can then look at what marketing can do to help sales. Was that the reason why you did that? So that it's easier for you to understand the vocabulary, that then you can tailor the content that you're going to come from marketing to fit the needs of the sales process?
Yes, generally. We had some organizational changes, so my job responsibilities had shifted. I was actually VP of all marketing, product marketing, marketing communications, all of the elements. We then split it. I gave up the product marketing. I was working on marketing communications. So yeah, we were doing all of the brochures and the collateral. We were doing trade shows, obviously print advertising, but all of a sudden it became digital advertising, social media, more of that. So I was right in the middle of content development when I sort of self-realized that the sales guys are not engaged in social media. They're not really engaged in, they were brochure printed, here, let me take this out, and hand this to a customer, walk them through it page by page kind of a thing. So that was really when I realized, okay, what content do they need? And that was actually when we started with Showpad.
Yeah.
We said, hey, number one, let's have a centralized place for all this content. And then you look at it, and it was so product-centric. All this content, like I said, brochures, specifications, presentations, feeds, speeds, all that kind of stuff. We were very rich with that information, but why change, or why look at this new technology or this new way to print, or that kind of content didn't really exist.
Yeah.
So that's when I first started out working on new content, and then I took on the certification training and realized, we got to train them on prospecting, we got to train them on customer buying journey, we got to train them on opportunity scoring, account mapping.
Very interesting. So what you're saying is that the purpose was content pushing initially, but then once you understood the sales process yourself, you started realizing, wait a minute, we also need to start training everybody on the new way of selling. So it also became like a training tool as well. Not just when I'm with the customer, I'm going to show the content, but now you're also trying to use this tool or platform to also pass on learning materials for salespeople to learn at their own pace. Am I understanding this correct?
Yes, very much so, because although it's not designed for this use, in Showpad, I created a sales skills channel.
Yeah.
Not for customer facing, but just to get to our salespeople.
Yeah.
Very easy to load it in there and get it to our salespeople. So I started out because a lot of our salespeople said, oh, professional selling skills, open, discover, satisfy, close, the framework for an effective sales call. That's a good refresher. I know that. Well, actually, we think there was a forgetting curve, and then the sales guys, managers were saying, when I'm in front of the customer and I watch the salesperson, he doesn't open very well.
Yeah.
His questioning skills are not very deep. He's quick to satisfy and pitch.
Yeah.
So I started doing these weekly refresher videos.
Fantastic.
And I just released video number 93. I've done 93 weeks in a row, and I've got more content coming. So beyond PSS, the skill building.
Absolutely, indeed.
I talked about good listening skills and good questioning skills, and how you build trust, and if there's a stalled deal, why is it stalled? And those, I tackled a bunch of different subjects. Getting past the gatekeeper was, I just did one on email subject lines.
Yes.
And getting compelling readership or whatever. And so I tackle anything and everything that I hear from them and I pick up industry-wide. And every Monday morning at 6 a.m., they get a weekly video. It's normally 1.5 to 3 minutes.
And do you keep track of, I guess with the platforms, you can keep track of how many people opened it?
Yes.
And does it also tell you how many times they opened it as well?
Yes.
Fantastic. So, and that's something that is great. So essentially what is nice is that this was something that came up. So I'm looking at Showpad has been around for 7-8 years. So this is a job function that you literally kind of carved out, maybe not the exact title or enablement then, but the idea of what it is today was carved out around 7 or 8 years ago when you understood that, wait a minute, the sales process is changing. So first of all, the content. So let me understand. The content that you had was not being used by salespeople. So now how can we do it better? So which means that you decided to understand and take my sales certification, but along the way you realize, wait a minute, that sales certification is great, but there's a lot of things happening even in the sales process, which might be preventing salespeople from using the really cool content that we are developing. So essentially you said, how can I help them in the sales process first? And then if I can demonstrate that, maybe I'll be much more successful in all the marketing collateral that they'll begin to use. Is that something that you began in one way, but maybe you're finding it out that it works better the other way, where the training part of it comes in first, and then once you do that, you gain the comfort of using that tool and technology so that they're much more comfortable in using the other aspects of which is actually pushing content to their customers.
Yeah, it's I'm thinking back about the journey, but we did get started with Showpad about 7 years ago. We started small. When we finally launched it here, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago. And if memory serves, I think we had 10 channels because we have a broad product portfolio, and we had 200 assets. We now have 30 channels and 1,200 assets. In the beginning, we had pretty much just brochures and text sheets. But the push was, finally, it's all in one place. It's kept up to date. It's accessed by everybody. Marketing can see what sales is using. That was the early benefit of Showpad. But then as soon as they got their taste of a little bit of video, they said, we need more of this. And so I would say from having virtually no video when we started, we probably have 25% of our assets now are video.
Even your product video. So now I'm not talking about videos about Terry talking about how to write email and stuff like that, or the subject line of an email, but actually product videos. Do you also do customer testimonials as videos?
Yes.
Wow.
We don't have a lot of those because they're kind of expensive to generate sometimes. But we have some of those. We have product managers or myself in front of equipment. You know, we've done user panels where we brought customers in for an event, and we've recorded those videos and we've turned them into snippets. Voice of customer.
Fantastic. And do you see
getting the sales guys to use that content? And we went through a bit of a dip. When we first launched the Showpad, we had high adoption, and then it kind of fell off. And that was because we weren't really feeding new content in. They were like, well, there's nothing new on there, So once we got going with content and they saw the value in the content, we got the adoption kicking back up. And, we look at sessions, we look at views, but we also look at how well they're sharing the information with customers to drive sales. So I wish this was all translating into great numbers that I could tell you in terms of the metrics, but we haven't seen a full impact yet from all that we've been doing.
But to be honest, I think, Terry, but that's one of the things that I'll touch upon later on, because there's one thing which is what you're looking at in terms of truly lag indicators, because at the end of the day, your sale might not be happening not because of what you're doing, but it could be a bunch of other reasons as well, right? So for example, the customer now saying, hey, if we are doing it and the competition is doing it, then it could be that, wait a minute, then the customer says, what is going to be the best choice for me. So there, it goes beyond that. Or your competition might come in and then say they're going to drop the price. So for me, it's very interesting is what are the metrics that you're using. For me, one of the things which I always push Showpad, and we're just waiting to test this out of the company. For me, it's if I can go to my customers and ask them the one question: what do you feel has happened to the quality of conversation that you've had with the sales rep? Because the actual sale is something that we do not know what's going to happen. But if the quality of the conversation has gone up, if the person starts trusting the salesperson more, from a viewpoint of enablement, this is what I think is one of the ways by which you can try and measure it. But it's very hard to get a company to actually say, can I go in and take a look at the quality of the conversation, right? So, and that is something that I will ask you not now, but at a later point in time. I think we should also meet face to face. Is if we can come in and do it for you. We are a neutral third party, and essentially we have your customers when we can say, what is happening in terms of, we send a survey out saying, hey, we were just curious to see about, do you find that the collateral being used by Fujifilm? So we're not going to talk about the salesperson, but we all know that if anybody in your database who's using it, if the collateral used by them is being useful to you, you know what I mean? Do you find that it answers your question? So kind of a proxy to try and understand what is happening there.
Yeah.
That might be very, very interesting from the viewpoint of saying what is happening there as well. So I think, again, that's something that some point in time we can always sit down, we can see what you have. And that's, again, depending upon the level of interest that is in there for you as well, because this is always not going to be a struggle for you. It's going to be a struggle for many organizations out there. And because the dynamics, the changes, everything is happening so much that you cannot do it. So for example, you talk about the fact that you're going through this. What is your go-to-market strategy? Do you go direct or do you go with channel partners?
Direct.
You go direct. So, okay, that part is okay. So at least in that way, you can at least go back and ask your customers direct. There are some companies that we know which also work with channel partners. Then you could do the best you can, but the question is that the channel partners, are they doing their part?
Yeah.
For the sales process.
We do have some channel partners, and the industry has consolidated, and I think the last number was a scary number, but like 85% of the printed output is produced by like 10% of the printers. So we do those direct.
Yeah.
But there's an awful lot of printers out there that are still in the medium size to smaller size that represent, sales opportunities for us or ongoing business for us.
Yeah.
And so we have thought about and looked at channel partners.
Let me ask you this. Have you, instead of looking at how do you measure your performance of the salespeople or the performance of the sales enablement, is it based on sales or in terms of your ability to sell more maintenance contracts? Because I'm assuming that, what is the price of an average printing press that you're looking at?
Yeah, the press can be anything from $500,000 to $2 million.
Yeah. So because
generally speaking, there's some outliers to that, but what we call the production inkjet, which covers the offset side of the business, we have a flagship press. It's a sheet-fed press, not a web-fed press, but without getting into that, it's about $1.5 million, $1.3 million, something like that. And so that's a different sale than selling the printing plate, which is what we manufacture that goes into the offset press, that produces big, long runs of printed output. Now people are saying, no, I want more personalization, I want more variable data, I want shorter run lengths, I want to be more nimble with my marketing, and so that's really put a squeeze on them because offset is made for long runs cost effectively. And inkjet enables them to produce short runs cost effectively, requires them to invest.
Yeah. No, but it's for me. So we'll finish this part because I have two more questions on the education part to us. So you talk about tools. You talk about tools, which is in terms of not tools. You talk about training that you have, the skill set, on top of looking at the content that you're creating, that you use that is used by your salespeople. Now the other part, which I hear a lot, I don't know if you guys do it, is you hear the term onboarding.
Yep.
Right. And now or there's a new term which I've heard, maybe you've heard it a lot, is reboarding. So which is great because apparently reboarding is getting established salespeople with a new way of thinking. So that's my idea of rebooting, which I think is really cool. So,
Yeah.
so my point to you is that when you started this out, you had to prove your worth in terms of all this business output there, right? But to what extent do you think that onboarding is also something that you're increasingly starting to look at? You know what I mean? Onboarding as a way of justifying the costs of this position that you have. Not you,
Yeah.
but sales enablement.
Yeah, it is a great question because we have had turnover, largely from age, and some of it because we had a voluntary early retirement program, and it took a lot of people out, and maybe it was time for them. Some of them were in their late 60s, early 70s. They had a relationship with these customers. They wanted to continue to work. Very, very deeply entrenched in the old way of working and selling. And maybe because these are consumables, there was an annuity value and a value to the relationship. But anyway, some of those have stepped off, and that's brought new people into our organization. I want to say we haven't done a very good job of hiring because we've had a lot of turnover as we've been onboarding.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's a new issue for us is, are we, do we have the right hiring process? Are we really screening correctly the candidates? But to your point, when we onboard, we kind of categorize it as there's some system training, there's product training, and there's sales training. And so we have developed a homegrown learning management system, LMS, that's actually embedded in Salesforce that they now can access and take classes, courses, and they have quizzes and hurdles, to get past. So that's what we're starting to implement now as part of our onboarding. Prior to that, we were bringing them into the office and putting them through the gauntlet, like drinking from a fire hose. Here's your Salesforce license. Here's your Showpad license. Here's how you do an expense report. Here's your company car. Here's the this. Here's the that. Here's how you do a quote. Here's how you do this. Here's how you do a print request. Here's how you. So many system things that they need to learn. And then you say, okay, here's our product portfolio, and it's a big portfolio, So every product manager would sit down with a new salesperson and try and get them up to speed with some basic knowledge about their products. And then I would step in on the selling side and say, here's our PSS method, and here's some selling skills videos and some things to get you going. And so, onboarding is a challenge for us because we would no sooner finish that process with one or two new hires, and a month or two later, we'd have another one or two new hires. And the sales manager would be saying, we got to get them on board. We got to get them out in the territory. We got to get them producing. So we're hoping that the LMS will help. Micro learning and virtual learning, and not having to bring them into the office here.
Okay. But why the tools that you've created, which is on Showpad, right? Again, it is on Show. You decided to use Showpad also to train your existing people. But why give a new LMS tool when you could use the same? You know what I mean? Unless you're saying is that the collateral created, the content that you're looking at is still the same content, but now except it's going to not be looking at it through Showpad, but we are now going to send it through Salesforce. Am I correct?
Some of the original videos and stuff I did in Showpad, I've now exported over to the LMS.
Okay.
Because the Showpad is really more of a customer-facing tool.
But if you take a look at the Showpad coach.
Yes, the Learn Core.
Yeah, so the Learn Core, right? So now, because it'll be very interesting for you to try and test it out, because if they're already getting their Showpad licenses, it's much more easier for them to try and take a look at, okay, this look and feel is, hey, this is how I'm on the road all the time. Instead of powering up two different portals, I'm going to have just one kind of an iPad with a Showpad where I'm going to take a look at this, but then it's going to send me a reminder saying that I need to also follow this training program. And if I believe what Showpad Coach is, for example, is that how would I, for a new person, how would I try and sell this new complex solution. You could even come up with role play saying, hey, Terry would every Monday would come up with, here is a profile of a new
Yep.
a new challenging person. So you're going to be talking to the foreman of a printing press, right? So now how are you going to try and do this? And they should record it, and then they
Yes.
send it to their kind of thing. That's kind of the peer coaching, right?
Yep.
So is
Yep.
it something that you can control, or because for me is that the moment I'm now thinking just as a new person coming in, and just the sheer mind-boggling aspect of opening 3 or 4 different portfolios and portals as against maybe just one
Yeah.
where I can do this. For me, that's what is very interesting, because last week, believe it or not, after this, I'll show you a link to the set of interviews that I've done. And hopefully in the future, I'm going to interview you as well. But then it's going to be more formal kind of stuff, right? And there, he talks about how the way Showpad Coach and with VoiceFox integration coming in, it's going to give you a lot of, I can even say, okay, I have all these aspects, and Terry can say, how well did this person do? Then based on that saying, hey, these are some suggested videos for you, and
Yep.
it's all under one. So that is much better than LMS, because at the end of the day, the content is the same, but the ease of what. So for example, after using iPhones for 3 or 4 years, I thought I'm just going to be cheap and get a Windows phone. And then after some point in time, I went back to iPhone, not because of it, just because the familiarity with it is, if I'm
Yeah.
using the same thing for selling, I'm using the same thing for learning, that
Yeah.
makes it probably easier, right?
Yeah. Yeah. LearnCore or a Showpad Coach comes at an additional cost.
Got it.
So I got a little pushback on,
Got it. No.
the readiness of the organization and the additional cost. And that's when we said, okay, we can do this LMS in Salesforce, which is a tool they need to be in every day anyway,
Got it. Okay.
documenting CRM. So that's why we went that route. But I think you're absolutely right. What we're missing is the tonality and the confidence and the presentation. It's not just the art of questioning, which is a skill in itself, but having that rapport and getting the customer to open up. And I think that is eventually where we're going to have to go. I looked at Commercial Tribe was one of them. I know
There's one out of Indy called Lessonly.
Lessonly, yes.
Yeah, but that's again. Having said that, if you're already paying for Showpad, I think, and that is going to be an incremental cost as against Lessonly is just going to be one more platform that we get used to, right?
Yeah.
Because no, but I was thinking because right now when we are going to write the paper, I am of a firm belief that it started from, as you beautifully pointed out, it started from marketing content not being used to coming up with, hey, wait a minute, if the marketing content has to be used, we have to think like salespeople. So then you find out, wait, salespeople actually also need to learn a lot of the basic skills, because those skills are changing in the marketplace.
Yeah.
So you get buy-in not with the initial purpose, but actually with the idea, with the reverse aspect, which is, hey, these guys are doing some pretty cool stuff. So obviously we'll trust the marketing angle a lot more, which is again something that is very nice. But then that learning part of it, when it applies to a young person, when I mean young or a new person joining Fuji, can then be used to onboard. Because at the end of the day, when I'm looking at, we are not looking at sales enablement as a platform, but as a philosophy, as a thought process in a company, right? So it doesn't really matter if you decide to use an LMS, but the content and the enabling the salespeople to be successful. If you're using the same content but in a different platform, that is, of course, the next part, which is again something that we can talk about. But for me, so onboarding the tools that you're using for your existing salespeople on Showpad can also be used to onboard. So which means that part of sales enablement, part of what Terry is doing, is also enabling and helping in the onboarding process.
Yes, definitely.
And do you use that in your argument to say you should be looking at measurement not just in terms of actual sales, but actually in terms of how prepared and how quickly our people are onboarded, forgetting the fact that some of them are leaving?
Yes, I mean, the cost of bringing somebody on and getting them productive. It can't take 6 months.
Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast who said the average tenure of a millennial at a company is maybe 3 years. If it takes you 6 months until they start producing, they're thinking about leaving or moving to their next job.
Indeed.
So you got to get them onboarded quicker, and I think that that's part of this bite-size learning. It's not sit me down in a classroom and throw it at me, but actually test them and make sure that they're tacking along and that they're getting it in sort of bite-size learning modules.
Yeah.
Back to, I want to make this comment too, back to that comment I made earlier about when we started Showpad, we had 200 pieces of content in there. Those 200 pieces of content are available on our website. So when you think about the customer and he says, I think I need something to do this, and he Googles it up, and all of a sudden you realize before he ever calls a salesman, he's looking at all this stuff. So the tools, as I define it, I mean, Showpad is a tool, a customer-facing tool, but we're talking about return on investment, payback calculators, total cost of ownership, basically trying to get the justification stage of a customer buying journey with more tools, but that also means customer reference sites, looking at surveys, outcomes. Customers have been able to use case studies, true case studies. This was the problem. These are the solutions they looked at. This is the one they selected. These are the results they're getting. True case studies. I think we get a lot of testimonials and anecdotal comments, but it's not really a true case study. So we've been trying to get more of that kind of content, and then we're relying on that salesman, and again, through the training and the coaching, to be able to say, okay, at this point of the customer journey, this content is really going to resonate. And present that content and provide that. Don't make them hunt and peck around on a website or Google search it or whatever. Bring some added value by saying, hey, I know you're in this phase of wanting to do more research, make sure you're making the right decision. Here's some information on comparative value, comparison of features and benefits, and here's some information, case studies on people that have adopted the solution and what they've been able to achieve. And so I think it's looking at mapping the content to the journey of the buyer.
Absolutely.
And not looking at it as, we have 4 stages in Salesforce: prospecting, selling, proposing, closing. I mean, customer's not saying, hey, I'm in the closing stage or I'm in the selling stage. He's looking at awareness, consideration, justification.
Indeed.
So we really tried to do a better job of getting them to think more like the customer and less about the product.
Indeed. Now, let me ask you this. So when you came from marketing into sales enablement, now do you now have to work with a marketing director and a sales director?
Yes. And I'm working more with the sales director every day and less with the marketing director.
Yeah, but it's interesting because you come from marketing, maybe you form that link, right?
I am a link because the sales guys say this is what we need. I go back to the marketing team and say, hey, this is what they say they need to be successful. We need to allocate some marketing dollars, time, resource for this to develop additional case studies, videos, or other content. So yeah, I'm in a good position there. Because I know marketing, I understand marketing, but I'm working more with trying to understand what the selling team needs to be successful.
And this is my one last question about this, and then for the time being, I'll just stop here. So then there is a lot of talk about return on marketing investment, right? Or marketing return on investment, right? There is essentially every B2B company every B2B marketer that I'm talking to who has to struggle for budgets has to prove the return on marketing investment, where they talk about cost per lead and everything else.
Yep.
But isn't also the success of the sales enablement not to be just directly measured with the success on the sales side, but because you give more pointed feedback about what customers want to see, that any improvement in your marketing efficiency shouldn't it also be seen as a success of sales enablement? Because if you can show that the way marketing is working right now is much more customer based rather than gut feel based,
Yep.
shouldn't that then be used also as a way of justifying that the sales enablement function, notwithstanding the licenses that you pay for, is actually delivering a lot more for our organization to be seen overall as being customer centric, rather than just defining it in a narrow view as the salespeople making the sale or not?
Yeah. It's a good framework for me because my struggle has been that our division president is a salesperson by his experience. And so knowing that, and knowing that if I'm going to really show value organizationally to the contribution I'm making, we were tracking three things essentially. One was number of salespeople that are hitting goals or hitting targets, and percentage-wise, they weren't achieving all of the targets. So that's one measure. Win rate was another, and cycle time was another. So we were thinking, okay, shorten the sales cycle by having the right content at the right time, equipping the sales guys with that information, differentiating from competition, making the Fujifilm solution more desirable, win rate up, more guys achieving more of their targets and achieving overall that it was going to raise the sales performance and the revenue as a result of that. We haven't seen that manifest itself just yet.
Not yet, but as I said, it'll be interesting because it'll be more interesting to see. Have you thought about taking not the whole organization, but the best performers, and then see their sales enablement usage? You see what I mean? And they're doing all that and seeing whether are they hitting those. Because at the end of the day, if you're looking at the overall group of people, maybe you're missing something out there, right?
Yeah. I did look at a mega trend. I don't know if it's a fair analysis. I took the first half of our fiscal, which ends at the end of March. Took the first half of our fiscal 18 performance that ended in September against our 19 performance. The good news is deal size was up, win rate was up, and cycle time was down. So our velocity looks like year over year, same period, trying to take out some seasonality. But now you say, okay, was 19 a better market condition than 18?
Oh, but indeed, you're absolutely right. Because one of the things so I've done a lot of training for companies that have equipment and they have consumables and maintenance contracts. So sometimes when equipment sales goes down, consumables and maintenance business goes up. And when economy is going to hit a downturn, you're going to have much more people saying, I'm going to put off buying something new. So your consumables and because the more the age, the more consumables it's going to, again, wear and tear.
Yes, very true.
So I think you should also be controlling for that given your business, because you talked about this, but I'm still not sure whether you guys sell printers. You don't sell printers, right? You only sell you do?
No, we do. We do now. Not the old method of printing, but the inkjet new method of printing.
Do you do digital printing as well?
That's what we do now, So everything we're doing is digitizing.
So full transparency, it could be that I might be doing some training for Zycon. Is that a competition of yours?
Yes.
So anyway, I might be doing some training for them, for their sales team. But again, I'll not use anything. But the idea is that what I'm going to train them on is the concept of how to move from selling products to selling solutions. But I talk about more the strategic part of the sales process, because you're no longer going to talk about just a 300,000 piece of capital equipment. You're going to talk about total cost of ownership. You're going to talk about that. But again, as I said,
Zycon is digital label presses. They were bought out by Flint
Group. It's part of the Flint Group. So apparently the bunch of marketeers had a program at Vlerick, but I was at Vlerick before. But they have the marketing folks, but now they want the salespeople also to look at the new way of selling. For us is that's what I always believe in, what I call as a strategic way. So if I want my people to be thinking strategically, I'm not going to begin by talking about the Miller-Hyman or the spin method.
Right.
I'm going to begin by talking about, okay, let's try and talk about this whole concept. I have this concept of why, who, where, what, and how. So the idea is that why do I do this is that I need to understand why should the customer buy a complete complex solution instead of just buying piecewise. And then why should I try and then who are those different kind of customers and who are the members of the decision-making unit? So usually what I do is that I'll then break them down into saying, okay, who are the people you're going to see? So for example, in my previous class, we've had some people from packaging. So essentially what we'll say is that, okay, if I'm talking to the person who's in charge of maintaining the printing press, they couldn't care less about what's happening in the market side. They just want to make sure that they get the job done in a period of time. Whereas if I'm talking to the person who's in sales, I need to make sure that I conform to the needs of the marketing person in the other organization. So they could say, Halloween is coming up, so I want small batch sizes. I want to do this and I want to do this. So essentially, you need to be looking at. So that is what we try and do. Whereas then if you try and take a look at the finance person, what they want is they want predictable monthly costs. And essentially from that viewpoint, so what we're doing is that we want our salespeople to be thinking along those lines. And then you can then follow it up with, okay, any kind of customer testimonials that you have. So, but again, as I said, that's how I'm going to do it, but I'm not asking for any kind of content from you. Essentially, I just thought you were looking at film and everything else. But yeah, so it looks like I might be doing a day and a half for them in Antwerp, and then, believe it or not, a day and a half maybe in Chicago.
Okay.
So that's for the American sales force. So, but again, as I said, I don't talk about sales enablement there. I'm talking about all the content that should be there to enable the sales team as well. So that is something that's really cool, because I really think that if you take a look at it in terms of sales, if you just focus on that, the dynamic of your businesses, if you're selling also the equipment, then it'll be very interesting to see whether it's not the size of the order or the sales cycle time, but are your customers signing up to not just simple buying a product, but actually bigger multi-year contracts, which, by the way, the multi-year contract might, because of the size of the order, because it's multi-year, might take a little bit longer for the customer to make a decision.
Oh, yeah.
You see what I mean? So that's why I always keep saying is that instead of velocity is great, but if the size becomes big, the customer might take longer, may dilly-dally a little bit. There could be new stakeholders coming in and coming out. That's the idea of the demand unit waterfall. But I think if from that viewpoint, from that level of complexity, having these tools might, if the salespeople feel and are investing time in it still, for me, that is a very good indicator that you're doing something right.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
for me,
the industry is rapidly transforming, and so you've got maybe older ownership of a small to medium size. Not sure if the children are going to take over or how this, and then they go, okay, should I cash out? Should I sell? Am I willing to take on this additional risk? Financial risk, transform the business. But in the meantime, if they don't transform, they're missing out.
That, by the way, one of my participants at Blerick before, Blerick was a place where Louis graduated from. That was a business school in Belgium.
Okay. Yeah.
He was my student. Louis was my student. I have nothing to do with their success, by the way. Louis was a student of mine. And essentially, and one of the other persons who wrote, a guy called Peter Minne, he's the guy who wrote the initial version of the product. He was the best man at my wedding.
Oh my gosh!
So that's a small
world,
indeed. So no, but because at the end, if we take a look at all of these kind of complexities happening, I really think that sales enablement. I'm not saying that just because I say that's how you should be looking at it, that your boss or the bosses above are going to accept it, because at the end of the day, this is your baby. I believe that is the case, but as far as they're concerned, if they're answerable to shareholders and if they're answerable to Japan, it's numbers, and numbers.
Yep.
Again, if it's from my experience with Japanese companies, it does not matter. It's always why, all the time, and just proving them with that. So, no, but this is fantastic, Terry. So, thank you so much. So, how many salespeople do you have across the United States?
Roughly 125.
Wow. So, here is my
about 30% of them are what we call specialists.
Yeah.
And 70% are account management, relationship management,
Indeed. And do all of them have sales ShowPad licenses?
Yes.
So I think at some point it'll be, if you're interested and if your management is interested, we can talk about this more, is that we can actually come in and take a look at, from a geek perspective, how we would look at performance improvements. You see what I mean? That is before you, not before you, but let's say, for example, last year, this year, how it has come up in terms of how it is. We can actually document it as well if you want, that not just year on year, but actually multi-year thing, trying to say how things have changed. But that's one other aspect. But I just wanted this because my colleagues, the concept is still new in terms of what this is. So that was the purpose of this call. But I'm hoping that in the future that we can have a conversation. We would like to use, what we're going to do is that we're going to interview around 15 to 20 companies. That's what we would like to do. And have 2 or 3 strong case studies.
Right.
And then you can choose whether you want to put Fujifilm name on it, or we can just say a big subsidiary, a North American subsidiary of a big multinational firm.
Okay.
But then it could be that we'll have very more specific questions talking to you, and maybe you could put us in contact with your marketing director and the sales director if they want to talk about this.
Okay.
And in return, we will share the results. But if you think, and again, there's no cost for you at all. If you think that if you ever need somebody to come and do a workshop for your team, you see what I mean? Those kind of things, that's something that we can definitely do. So which means that that's just another thing that you have, or you could say, hey, we're going to just organize a webinar about what are current trends. So we're going to talk to somebody who is not from within Fuji, but is looking at all this. So we're going to do a webinar, and then I could talk to you about trends that are happening. So kind of reiterate what you're saying. You see what I mean? And from that viewpoint, and then that is also something that webinar could also be like a kind of a tool to reinforce what you're trying to do as well. So that is something.
And if I'm ever in Indiana, can I sit in on a class or something?
Absolutely, you can come in, but we don't do exec ed. So that's the whole point. We do not do executive education. So you can
no. But I mean, sit in on a student class, or
yes, please do. If you want to recruit, I would love Fujifilm to come and recruit our students.
And do what?
To recruit our students as well, because again, I do not know if you recruit fresh from university. By the way, one of my co-authors on this paper that we're working on, he recently had a publication where they try and take a look at when an organization has to recruit somebody, are they better off recruiting a veteran from the field, veteran as in an experienced person from the field, or are they better off by recruiting rookies? And then what they show across a B2B company and a B2C company is that in the short run, the veteran works better, but given the changes in dynamics of the way you sell, in the long run, the rookie might tend to perform better because they're more open to feedback and more open to new technologies and new ways of working. And in the rookies, they differentiated because what you have right now is that there are around 100 universities across the United States where you actually have students getting certified in sales. So for example, I run the sales center here. We have around 120 students at different stages, but who will graduate with a bachelor's in sales.
Great.
And,
so I met Robert Peterson from
NIU.
Illinois.
He
and
is
Howard Dover.
Howard Dover, yes.
And Joel
Lebon.
Indeed. They were at the Sales Enablement Society meeting down in San Antonio.
Indeed.
I met them for the first time.
And I think barring Joel, the others might do consulting, but they have not done a lot of corporate training. Maybe it's changing. What do I mean by that is that there's a difference. For example, one of the things which I'm doing right now is there's a company called ArcelorMittal. It's one of the largest steel companies in the world. Right now, I am creating content for them, as you said, bite-sized content, 3-minute videos, 4-minute videos, essentially that people from all over the world, so essentially they have it in 3 batches or 4 batches. So essentially the content is on customer centricity and strategic marketing. So I created around 7 to 8 short videos, followed that with reading. Then they have to do exercises, and to which I will respond to their exercises and the way they do it. Then we have a webinar where they then can ask me questions from the assignments that we've given and stuff like that. And then they have to do a final project, which I grade. All of it, I'm sitting in my office in Muncie, Indiana.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And grading them on it. If you want to sit in on my class, nothing would please me more. We actually have a class. I teach a class next semester called Sales Technology. Right? The class, and I break down sales technology into the way I look at it is that I begin the class with the concept of what are things happening in the buying process, because I think that we cannot talk about the sales process without understanding the buying process and how it is happening. And then I talk about the fact that 57% of a buying decision is made, but I say it is not about that. We may go back and forth about questioning for each, but what I'm talking about is that I am more interested in understanding the numbers that says that 77% of B2B buyers do their homework.
Yeah.
Now, the 57% is that we can always go back. We can go into challenger sale. We can challenge whether they really understood what is happening there or not. That's not what we're looking at. What I'm more interested in is if 77% of them are doing their homework online, which means that is my marketing collateral in line with what they are looking for.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So for me, and this is my opinion, whether I can do it academically is a different story. Sales enablement for me begins with marketing automation, search engine optimization, because that is what I mean is when I asked you, when you said I talk to sales and then I go to marketing, so marketing then should be smart in creating the collateral that goes in on my web pages.
Yes.
Should be using the terms that salespeople are saying that their customers are using to go Google online.
Yes.
And so essentially what I'm saying is for me, sales enablement starts all the way from there, because that is why if you ask me, if I'm a sales enablement director, if I'm able to do this, I'm going to go to my boss and fight for the fact that every time marketing claims that they're becoming more efficient, it's thanks to sales enablement, if that is a separate function. Because if marketing has changed the way they look at it, it's great. Number one. The second thing is, most marketing, if you believe what a lot of these companies say, which says that 60 to 80% of marketing collateral being created is not being used by salespeople, and if you can even demonstrate that from 60% you've gone down to 40%, thanks to you, because you are the one getting feedback from the sales into organization, into sale, into marketing, that is a win, right?
Yeah.
So which means that any marketing efficiency claims, part of it credit should go to you. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but we should fight for it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. That's one part. The other part, of course, is that the whole idea of the other side is, if I'm creating this content, if my salespeople start looking at it, and my salespeople, for it to work, we call it, there should be buy-in. So when I mean buy-in, there should be two kinds of buy-in. There is what I say is cognitive buy-in. That is, I am willing to put the mental effort needed to understand how this works and how it's going to help me. The other one is continued effort. That is, it's just not that I just do it once and I let go. It's continuously. So for example, it will be very interesting to see if you can do a test between those people who are on your site frequently. Are you seeing them perform much better? You see what I mean? Than those who just came to you once or twice and do it periodically. The idea being, maybe you're already doing it. You know what I mean?
No, I'm not. That's an interesting.
But those are the kind of things that if you give us access to your data, I have my geek friends who can do it. Why do I say geek friends? Is that I've forgotten how it is to crunch data, because when I was at Vlerick, we only did corporate trainings.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So for me, from that viewpoint, those are the kind of things that when I teach a class on sales technology, I begin with marketing automation.
Yep.
Then I go into sales enablement. But then I talk about sales enablement where I have, let me see. First of all, I'm going to stop recording because my colleagues are going to think, what the hell is he talking about? So I'm going to stop recording here. Okay. So let me see if I can share my desktop with you. Where is my, wait, it's out here. Yeah, share desktop. Okay. And wait, is it doing it? Present desktop. Okay, present. Okay, I'm going to see. Okay, I was on Facebook. Okay. Are you seeing, this?
It says it's loading, so
Okay.
maybe I will. Yes, I am seeing it now.
So this is our YouTube channel, huh?
Yes.
Right? I don't know if you've seen it. So if you go
I have, yes.
If you go in and you have playlists, and I have it, if you notice, I have lots of interviews.
Wow, yeah.
Sure, and you might know this person, that's Tamara Schenker.
Yes, right. Yeah.
This is me talking to, number 30 is me talking to a guy from Lessonly, which is also a kind of a sales enablement platform. Huh?
Yeah.
And this is me talking to Eli Cohen from Salesforce.
Yep.
See, and I have all this. This is about customer success. This is a nice one. This is me talking to the VP of Customer Insights of Salesforce. Huh? So, by the way, I'm creating a lot of this content.
This is viewable by me. I mean, I can
Everybody.
access it.
Yes, it's
Okay.
it's you can also, let me go in. Let me go to home. By the way, this is okay. I watch a lot of cricket as well, so the greatest game ever played. By the way, so in case, so essentially, if you want to see my view on sales enablement, this is a 3.5 minute video on sales enablement. Huh?
I think I did see that one.
Yeah, so I have that, but then that's just for my students. Huh? You know what I mean? And then I also have a lot of short videos as you can also take a look at. So this is, I have to structure it better, but you'll see I have basic things like what are the basic aspects of the sales process. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how do you take a look at key accounts? So all the kinds of things that you're talking about, like bit-sized learning and everything else.
Yes. Interesting.
We are beginning to do this. So when I teach my sales technology class, I talk about sales enablement. But then what I do is that I only talk about the kind of things that we're talking about here. So essentially, I think if you want to come and sit in on the class, anytime you're welcome. But if you're willing to give us access to the 125 users you have and take a look at what they're having, and if you also, I'm assuming that as part of what you do, you also need to connect it to the performance of the salespeople, right?
Yes.
Right. So I'm assuming you also have access to that. So if you have, over a period of time, if you have those numbers, we can even go in and start taking a look at what are the trends. You see what I mean? We can also tell you some of the big things. And if you want us to sign an NDA, we can do all that as well. Give it some, I mean, you don't have to decide it now. Just think about it.
Yes. Okay.
And if you think that at some point in time, if you say, hey, one of the things you want to do for your Salesforce is, well, let's have a kind of a webinar. I'll clean up. I'll just make sure I shave as well. You know what I mean? And then if they're spread across the country, and then that's something that we could definitely, if you think it makes sense. So, because I really think that this is really cool what you guys are doing. For me, again, as I said, I am not the VP where Japanese bosses are sitting on my head or whatever is the case. Right. So for me, I really think what you're doing is really cool. The sheer number of assets that you have, the kind of videos that you're loading out there, I think it's just phenomenal. I think it's just great. And I think that how it has to be used and how it has to be kind of, you know what I mean? How we can cut and dice it in terms of truly what is happening. And that's something that if you can give us access to that, we can try to tell you a kind of a story from a different perspective.
Right, and that might be what I need right now. You know, I'm so close to it that I maybe need a third party to analyze and look at where we're at.
All for zero cost. All we need is if we can get access to the data.
Yep.
And then we can analyze it, and so we will get a publication, but we'll not mention Fujifilm's name.
Yeah.
But we can actually share that. So essentially, my colleague, who's actually a professor at Notre Dame.
Oh, wow.
So it's not long for us to actually come down to visit you and then see what kind of data that you have so that we can do and take a look. So what he does, I will translate it into English. You know what I mean? And that's something that for sure we can do as well. But I think this has been wonderful for me in terms of understanding how you guys work. And then if my work brings me to Zycon, I think I should be in Chicago in January. And I was telling them, man, you want me to come to Chicago in January? I'm going to be free.
You're right. He's testing you.
Yeah. So, but if that's the case, maybe I can swing by and see you. But of course, needless to say, anything that we treat is going to be completely confidential. So.
Yeah. Well, and I hope that I can get down to Indiana.
Please maybe. Do. Please come back. And if you have this number, and we can also meet midway, so I can come down to South Bend. So what I'll do is that, so I will send you a wish list of what would be really cool to get access to. You can take a look at it. You can see if that's possible and if that works, because what we always like to see is over a period of time. We need to take a look at period of time, what is happening out there. So when that happens, we can look at trends as well. You know what I mean? When that happens, it's easier for us to spot to see what is happening, and we can do that as well. So if that is the case, and if you say you think you can give us access to that data, then it would actually make sense for us to actually meet halfway. Because if you want to come to Indiana, the next time I'm going to be teaching that class is going to be it might be February or March.
That's the sales technology one?
The sales technology one, indeed.
Okay.
So that's something that we can do. In fact, I can even have you as a guest speaker.
I have time to prepare, perhaps.
You don't have to at all. You don't have to. Essentially, what you can just literally, you can come and show to the kids how your platform looks.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's all. And I will tell them that this is what it is. So no, absolutely. But I think you're welcome anytime you want here, Terry. And I think that's something. I'll send you the wishes. You can try and take a look at it. So we would love. The simplest way is without giving access is that we can talk to a couple of your salespeople, a couple of your sales director, as well as the marketing director. So we'll do the same thing with 10 other companies.
Yep.
And then we'll try and see what is happening from each person, what their thoughts are, and we can share that with you.
Okay.
That's something we can do. And then the other one, of course, is that concretely in terms of looking at the aspects of they're looking at the aspects of what you're doing out there and the impact it has on your performance over a period of time. Okay. That is something we can definitely also try and take a look at, because from a business point of view, we are always focusing on the short term.
Yeah.
But maybe there are things and trends happening in the long term that might be interesting for us, controlling for certain things, of course. So if your economy is going up or down, you could do all the things that you want.
Right.
It's not going to work. So absolutely. So I will send you the link to my YouTube channel. So soon, next week, I'm going to be uploading content, hopefully from Louis, where I talk to Louis about sales enablement, where it's going. And then after that, I talk to Tim Sullivan. I guess you know him from SPI.
I don't know that.
SPI is Sales Performance International. He has a book called The Consultative Sales. Essentially, SPI is Sales Performance International. So they also are working with them. We are also in talks with a company called Ecosystems. Ecosystems, they say they have a module called outcome-based selling. So, and essentially we have struck a kind of a partnership with them where tomorrow I'm going to send them a wish list of questions we would like to ask. So if we can get from you, and then once we do the short interview, we'll send you the list of questions we would like to ask, and you can decide yes or no. You've already helped us out by just telling us what it is.
Okay,
and then we can share those insights from what we have done. And then the idea is that we need at least to interview 10 to 15 different companies to understand different case studies. You see what I mean? That how it evolves. So for example, how it evolved for you could be quite different from a company that has learned. So you started when the sales enablement wave was really picking up. So you had to learn all by yourself.
Yes, somewhat, yes. Blazing the trail.
Indeed. Right. So for me, if I hear everything that you said, for me, I'm nodding my head. I go like, great. So I'm going to begin with using sales enablement platforms to upskill my people for the new demands on the job. Once they understand what is happening there, then I tell them where marketing collateral can help them in the sales process. Whereas for you, it was the other way around. You were creating the content and you had that and people use it and drop. But then the more you started creating content, they said, wait a minute, I can use this there. And then you can start cross-tabbing, right? I can say, when you go talk to a customer about this, remember, this could be the potential marketing collateral that you could go pick it up. The moment you cross-tab, that's when learning truly happens.
Yeah. All right.
Terry, thanks a lot. I'm sorry that I went more than half an hour, but I get excited every time I talk about sales and
enablement. No, it's been very valuable for me, Divya, to talk about this, because it's what I'm doing every day, and I'm in the throes of trying to get it to the next level. So,
Terry, anytime you want, just call me. Let's have a conversation, because I learn from the process too.
Yeah.
So if you have something bogging your mind, maybe I'll confuse you more, but at least you printed it out. So that's what's going to happen.
All right.
Terry, an absolute pleasure, sir.
Take care.
Have a wonderful thing, and you'll be hearing from me soon. Huh?
Okay. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.